Hello and welcome to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. I'm Steve Soucie, joined as always by a very bright and colorful Mason Schweizer. How you doing this morning, Mace?
Good morning, Seuss. I just wanted to make sure you were up and at it. I had to test the eyeballs for you real quick this morning.
There we go. Success. So, we didn't get as many as we maybe would have hoped for through week one of the playoffs, but still a pretty strong contingent from the Kankakee area. Moving on to round two. You unearthed a pretty interesting fact about our three city teams over the course of the weekend. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is the first time ever that all three city schools won a playoff game the same year. Tried getting a nice story together about that last minute. Did not quite happen, but that'll be coming soon. That's not done yet. But it's only really been a handful of times that all three teams made the playoffs the same year. There's only been a couple of times where two of the three teams won. I thought it was kind of funny. There's been two times where Kankakee and Bradley had both won a playoff game in the same year. And those 2 years, Bishop Mack didn't even make the playoffs either of those years. They've been in it, 40 times, 38 times, something like that. Yeah. But I think it's just a testament to how our area has grown in terms of talent. That it used to always be that usually it was two of those three teams were good because the public schools didn't have enough kids because Bishop Mack had them over there or vice versa. And now there's enough to support three really good football programs, three really good football coaches with good coaching staffs, good cultures at all of them. Really a wild time to be a city football fan right now because you're seeing things you literally have never seen before.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it always seemed like Bishop McNamara was kind of the constant, like the entire time that I was at the Kankakee paper, and prior to that, they were in every year, won at least a round or two almost every year. But it seemed like you were saying, it's very rare that we would have all three in the playoffs in the same year. If one was really good, one might be good enough to get in. The third one was down. It always seemed like there was kind of a little bit of a cycle that you just never kind of got them in lockstep. But you're right. It seems like for the first time, you can kind of look at all those three programs, and I know we've talked about this at great length, both here and privately. You'd love to see the All-City Series renewed because this time you don't know. You don't really know what would happen in those games. In the past, especially at the end of the series, it was kind of premeditated. You knew what you were going to get. I mean, I know I went to the last probably 6 or 7 Bradley Kankakee games, and I was pretty confident I knew what the result was going to be as I walked onto the field. And 95% of the time I was right. I got exactly what I was expecting. So I think it would be wild if that was still in play.
Has there been a Bradley Kankakee game played since the one that got pushed to Saturday due to bad storms that Friday night?
I don't think so. I think that was the last one. Yeah.
Now we should add also that this is just since Westview and Eastridge merged after 82. I haven't looked at 10-ish years in between, but I would be shocked if two more. If we had two Kankakee schools win plus Bishop Mack plus Bradley. Could go back and look for that as well.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of these second round matchups now. Let's start with Kankakee, a game that I think is one of the more interesting ones in the second round calendar. Kind of with the dimensions of both programs right now. I mean, I know Kankakee has had some health struggles, and I know that offensively they weren't exactly, obviously, as dominant as they have been before. I mean, how did that adjustment go without Philip Turner in the lineup? Is he done? Is he done for the season, or is that still up in the air?
I'm not sure on the season. I would assume so, just because that's what I had kind of been told the night of the Creek game. But hey, if they make a run, maybe a couple weeks from now they're still playing in a semifinal or something. Maybe we'll see him. I do want to give them a little credit though. They weren't playing like they had a backup quarterback in, and they don't really think Cedric Terrell is quote unquote a backup, but they were pushing the ball down the field. They were taking chances down the field. Had a couple either just missed or, as Kaimani Billings, who had one of the big fourth quarter touchdowns, he said, I dropped a wide open pass. I had to make it up to my team. Zeke Stroud, who scored a big touchdown in the fourth quarter, dropped a pass earlier, said he had to make it up to his team. So I think that the last 5 or 6 minutes, that offense looked like it has for most of the season. They were good with the discipline. That was an issue against Crete. Penalties were an issue. The penalties were fine. And man, that defense. They had 3 fourth quarter stops, all on the opposite side of the field, to give the offense really good field position. They didn't allow a touchdown. Obviously, it doesn't get much better than that. But offensively, a lot more passing than maybe I thought. I thought it'd be a lot of kind of option stuff with Terrell. Their backfield's getting healthy at the right time, so they got Kamani Billings back there, Jamari Harrison. Although I did not see Zayden Henley. Now that I say that out loud. But I really thought the offense, especially in that fourth quarter, made some really big plays. You're going to need to score some points against Providence. The Kankakee defense is going to do its job, but Providence is Providence. They're probably going to find the end zone a couple of times. So that as an offense, you're going to have to as well.
I think this is an interesting Providence team that's really that's what makes this interesting a matchup for me. I think Providence is really rounding into form nicely too. Some underclassmen offensive players at key positions that have really been flourishing over the last couple of weeks. Dominic Vita, their sophomore quarterback, was 11 for 11 last week throwing the football. Broden Macker is turning into an absolute monster, their junior running back. So the Kankakee defense, which I know they kind of lean on, especially now, is going to get a big test here.
Yeah. And hey, we should say this is the start of a theme. We'll see if our listeners can pick up on our all city opponents theme that we've got this week. So Providence.
Yep, we'll wrap that up at the end of the pocket there. But next up, we've got Bradley traveling up to St. Lawrence for an early Friday evening matchup. The Boilermakers were pretty much expected to do what they did against Shepherd last week. How did you feel like after picking up the information on that game, where the Boilermakers feel they are heading into the St. Lawrence game?
Well, the defense was pretty good for the most part. Shepherd got a couple late points. But I think, all season long, we've talked about the pass game and kind of overlooked how the Boilers have 2 terrific running backs. And they both went over 100 yards and scored twice apiece, Isaac Allison and Kyron Edmond. You want to be able to take that run game on the road, obviously. The pass game struggled a bit. Lizelle Edmond did not play, the Pittsburgh State commit, and you could tell that kind of had an effect on the pass game as a whole. I think it was the lowest passing output that they've had all season, and by kind of a decent little bit. So to be honest with you, Soucie, I don't know a whole bunch about this year's St. Lawrence team other than they've had a new coach come in, and Coach Swanson, and he's done a really, really good job of keeping things where they're at. Is Coach Neeson, is he at Providence now, the former?
Yes, coach? That is correct. Yep.
City irony there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Boilers 42-21 on the surface. You're like, 21's kind of a lot to give up to a 4-win Shepherd team, but the context of the situations late in the game and stuff. I think as long as this ground game can stay this good, and if the pass game can be what it's been this season, I think we're still looking at the Boilers being one of the toughest outs in Class 6A.
St. Lawrence has been kind of an interesting team for me this season, trying to kind of get a figure out. I mean, they have, in my opinion, they play in a very, very tough division of the Chicago Catholic League. But when you dig into their schedule, I really feel like they've only got one kind of sort of marquee win, a win over St. Patrick, who's also still alive in the playoffs. The rest of their schedule, I mean, they have a bunch of playoff points, but they didn't win any of those games. Really, when it comes down to it, I mean, they lost to all the teams inside of their division. Granted, it's a really good division. The other teams in their division are Fenwick, Carmel, and then I'm drawing a blank on the other one Montini, who went undefeated. So, I mean, that's obviously a really good group of teams in your league. But they didn't win any of those games. So, I mean, I'm not saying I think they're a bad team. I just don't really know if they have the bullets in the gun, if you will, to take a real serious shot at Bradley in this one.
Well, they are at home, and it's a tough place to play up there. That home crowd can get pretty loud, and you got to travel well getting up there. As playoffs go, a relatively short bus ride, and the Boilers are used to making those hour-ish bus rides up to the city and suburbs. But I think the Boilers just keep doing what they've been doing. They should be fine.
and now we'll wrap up with the third of the three teams from the city area that we are looking at. This one has a little bit more history to it. We're talking about, we've got a little bit more. We can go in the Wayback Machine and kind of take a look at this one. Bishop McNamara traveling up to IC Catholic. The last time I remember this game being played, I'm not a big fan of driving in winter weather. And Mac was playing IC Catholic in his semifinal game that I was anticipating that the weather was going to get really bad. So I drove up early before the weather came in, went and watched a movie, an early movie. It was a Saturday afternoon game. And I came out of the movie. When I went in the movie theater, all was dry and clear. When I came out of the movie theater, it was like I was walking into a winter wonderland. So that was a fascinating game. That was back when I was doing what you do now. I was on the radio, and my former partner and I, Paul Schmidt, were huddled in the formerly tiny IC Catholic press box, literally trying to defrost the one window with our hands as we watched the snow scoops come out between downs to try to create the field. So, but there's been a lot of games between these two. IC Catholic has won most of those games. They did not win that game. That was a game that Mac won in the semifinals, went to the state championship and won. But basically, this has been a series, at least in recent memory, IC Catholic has kind of owned it. So it makes for an interesting matchup here in the second round.
So that was the 2015 state semifinals then, right? Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I got to see this one plenty when these two teams were Metro Suburban Conference rivals. My first 5-ish years here. And they also got to meet in the 2018 4A state championship game. So yeah, these two teams have done battle a lot. I was talking to former Mac coach Rich Zanani the other night on the phone, and he loves Bill Kreft. They get along really well, the IC head coach, and he told me, back around that era that you were talking about, when they, first were trying to start to build their program, and they weren't in the conference, they were no conference rivals or anything. They just had a 2-year non-conference schedule. And he said, Coach Kraft told me, we want our program to be like your guys's, a good small school Catholic power in the state. And that was a little over a decade ago. And obviously that's worked if you look at where things have gone since. Really excited about this. Like we said last week, every time Mac's been in a game where we're like, nope, this is where they're going to pick up a loss this year. Hey, they're 10-0, man. They just keep proving us wrong every time. Obviously, this is going to be a tougher test probably than the rest of them have been combined. But it's hard to keep doubting them over and over again. And there's a lot of talent on that IC team. I was a little surprised to discover that they don't have kind of that go-to signature put a game away running back, that they're kind of more pass oriented this year than in years past. But I will say the one advantage that Bishop Mac has going into this game, they're very senior heavy. They've got a lot of senior experience. This is a pretty young Knights team. I think they'll have seniors. So I think that's one thing, these Mac kids do not want to be done. They want to prove to everybody, that they are state worthy. I think that's a huge advantage, one that you're not going to see in a scorebook. But I think they're going to have to really ride that out to be able to pull off a win like this Friday night.
Yeah, it's kind of been an interesting blueprint that IC Catholic has employed over a long period of time, where you look at that roster and you see sophomores, sometimes freshmen, in key positions. That's why it always feels like IC Catholic is a relatively young team if you look at it on paper, but they've got guys. I mean, it doesn't look, even though you look at that roster, you see sophomores and juniors. These are guys that have a ton of varsity snaps because they've played a role in some cases since they were a freshman, and they've been doing that for well over a decade now. Because I even remember going back to that 2015 game. Mac won that game. They were loaded. They were heavy on talent. But if you looked at what IC Catholic had on the field, you were like, this is going to be a problem in a few years. And it turned out that's exactly what it turned out to be. So just kind of interesting thing that they just keep doing like over and over again in that program. But I mean, right now, yeah, you're right. It is a young team. The core of that team is in its sophomore class. So it's kind of an interesting situation. And like I said, this is another situation where you look at that roster and you're like, boy, I mean, if it doesn't happen this year, look out in the future, and it may still happen this year. I mean, that's the reality of it. So, kind of an interesting situation there. Well, Mason, you want to touch back? You want to go full circle here and touch back on the running theme that we have through our city programs this week?
I have to give credit where credit's due. Bishop McNamara's Ian Earps told me this Monday when I ran into him, actually pointed it out to me. But all three of our city schools have Chicago Catholic League opponents, CCF, ESCC opponents. So that the kids are coining it the 815 versus the CCL is what we've got this weekend.
Outstanding. So, all right, well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back and break down the rest of the area matchups in the second round of the playoffs.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brinton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike, with dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country. We meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Welcome back to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. Mason, we've got a couple more teams to talk about here. Let's start with that Class 4A matchup. Coal City making that trip up to Dixon. This seems like a little bit of a deja vu situation. Well, obviously, this is a game that was played last year. Some of the same components in place. But the one thing that I kind of found interesting when I was digging into this game a little bit is it almost feels a little bit like maybe kind of flipped roles here, because Dixon almost feels like exactly what Coal City was last year. Really, really strong defense and a running back that centers the entire offense around it. Got to look at Landon Niggy's stats for the season. He's over 2,000 yards rushing, kind of reminiscent of what Coal City had last year with Landon Benson. So, and then Coal City's kind of changed the way it is kind of perceived. But they went back into the Wayback Machine a little bit last week and kind of put it on Logan Natashak's back against Sterling in their easy win. So just kind of a fun little parallel that's going on here with these two teams matching up again.
Yeah, Logan, 272 and 5 touchdowns for a passing team. That's pretty good. This is going to be a headbanger. You know, last year, this was one of the more exciting games I thought our area had all season long. Just these two really physical, like you said, defensive-oriented teams. And this was a game that last year was in the quarterfinal round. This year it's to get to the quarters. And it was some late grit for the Kohlers. You know, they had a 4th and short on their own side of the field, and they knew if we get it, we can run out the clock. If not, they're probably going to tie us, maybe even beat us. 4th and short, they gave it to Landon Benson, and they got it. They forced a couple of late turnovers. Defensively, I believe one of them might have been a little earlier in the game, but either way, it was a 20-13 game. It's going to be really close again this year. Like you said, that Dixon run game, very explosive. The Dixon defense is incredible. They've got, 6 shutouts on the season? Now, I know that most of those games have not been against teams that have an offense like Coal City does, but there's still something to be said about that many shutouts. So I think the Kohlers, if that passing game that has been really good for most of the year can show up again this weekend, I think they should be fine. But I also think that this is one of, if not the closest game that our area's got this week. Yeah,
I really do. You kind of if you look at it once, you're like, well, I think maybe these teams, and then you spin it around, you look at it again, you're like, oh, I can see how they could win. I mean, I really do feel like this is one that's going to be really, really close. Dixon has the advantage of having this at their place. That might help them out a little bit. But on paper, this looks about as close as you're going to get, especially for a second-round matchup. Granted, it is a 4 or 5 game seed-wise, so you would kind of expect that. So, but it's still it's a very hard one to kind of pin down in terms of what you think is going to happen. So let's switch gears to what I think has the potential to possibly be the fastest game in IHSA playoff history, as Wilmington travels to Seneca. Both teams have virtually no interest in throwing the football if they don't have to, and really lean heavily on just trying to grind the opponent into submission. Both teams have done a really good job of that. But Wilmington, I think right now, is playing about as well as I recall them playing in quite some time. I expected them to win comfortably last week, but let's just call it what it was. The violent nature in which they dominated that first-round game against West Hancock I didn't know what happened in the game. I just opened up the summary email that Coach Drew Tyler sends me on a weekly basis when I saw it on my phone. And the first thing I saw was 70-8. And then I looked a little bit farther down into the box score and saw that Ryan Kettman touched the ball 3 times and scored on all 3 of those touchdowns. So it's kind of one of those things where they are just playing at a really, really, really high level. And while I think Seneca is a really, really good football team, I think they're going to have a hard time kind of stopping this locomotive right now.
The first thing I saw in that email from Coach Tyler was the 42 they scored in the second quarter. I thought that was the final score at first, and then I kept looking. And I do find it interesting. I forget which, the Wilmington games get covered by at least 2 radio stations seemingly every week. I forget which one Coach Reeds was on, but he expressed a little remorse kind of for them scoring so much. And it's like, dude, you guys are you're snapping the ball and handing it off, and that's just shows, like you said, how explosive they've been right now. I'd set the over-under at 1.5 passes thrown from both teams over the first 3 quarters. But yeah, like you said, this Wilmington team is on a mission. That defense has been just downright disgusting as well, and I think is going to cause that Seneca run game a lot of fits. This game was a classic 2 years ago, one that Wilmington somehow pulled out, kind of a rabbit out the hat. Reed Juster's field goal sent it to overtime where they were able to pull things out. I don't know if this one's going to be quite that close. Like you said, I think this Wilmington team's just really dominant right now. But these 2 old rivals have gotten together for some good ones over the years.
Yeah, there have been some. I mean, when they were both members of the former Interstate 8, now the Illinois Central 8, they played, they were in the same league. They played on a regular basis. And there were some times in the early 90s where it wasn't Wilmington Coal City, it was Wilmington Seneca that was at the top of the league. So that rivalry goes way back. They played some non-conference games in recent years. A couple of years ago, the interesting scenario was Seneca actually beat Wilmington in the regular season, then came back in the playoffs, and Wilmington turned the favor back around and beat Seneca. So there, in the immediate future history, there's been quite a bit. In the past history, there's been quite a bit through these 2 programs. So should be a really fun one on Saturday night. And like I said, if you're going to that game, it starts at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. Expect to be back in your car before 8. That would be I expect the pace of this one to go at. So so that's very interesting. Okay, now moving down to Class 1A, got another game that's got a little bit of history behind it. As Clifton Central travels to Dwight, once again, former conference partners when they were both part of the Sangamon Valley. So when they switched over in there, that was they were moved away from one another. But Clifton Central doing what they need to do. Got I think maybe they scuffled a little bit more with Knoxville than I thought that they would last week, but ultimately got the job done. Dwight is kind of an interesting story for me. At the beginning of the year, I was like, man, they made the 2A quarterfinals last year. They dropped that co-op that didn't really add a lot of players to their roster. So that dropped them into the 1A field. But they kind of scuffled a little bit early in the season. But it really looks like they've figured something out over the last couple of weeks. They have went from being a team that I thought was going to maybe be lucky to get into the playoffs to being they might be a little bit of a problem here. So I think this is a little bit more interesting second-round matchup than I expected if you would have told me this was what the second round matchup was going to be, say, a month ago.
Well, the top player from that co-op last year, Aiden Cullum, is at Dwight now anyway. So I think they were just kind of like, well, what reason do we have to add to our enrollment?
Yeah.
He was at Dwight almost the same day, dang near that announcement was made.
Right.
I do think it's going to be a really cool thing. This is maybe my favorite. I don't really think you call this a stat as much as note. Both teams have a running back named Evan Cox. I think that's a pretty fun trivia tidbit about this one. But, this Trojans junior class is one that they really like. Coach Staniford, when I covered their game against Wilmette last year, told me we're like a year away from doing what we're, supposed to be doing. So now they really have expectations, and I think this is going to be a headbanger. The Comets are kind of at that point with their senior class where, hey, these are the guys that have gotten us there. Brady Schul, he set the school single season passing yard and touchdowns records in last week's win. Just a testament to what he's been able to do for this program. And, the pass game's been there all year long for the Comets. The run game, the past half of the regular season, roughly, has kind of kicked it into gear too. And obviously the defense last week was awesome. Gave up the first 6 points of the game, didn't allow another point the rest of the way. So maybe this is another case. Maybe the Trojans get a score or two early, but I think this Central defense will settle in. We're going to see the offense, whether it needs to be through the air, on the ground, make plays. And I think the Comets will be set up for what could be a really fun showdown with Stockton in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, definitely looks like it could be an interesting kind of breakdown with that game. But that's a really fun one to just kind of look at it. And I know there's some threads within the coaching staffs and schools there between Central and Dwight too. There's some commonality between those two schools. So that should be a really interesting matchup and how that breaks down. So got one team left in the 8-man football playoffs, the alma mater, getting first playoff win in school history there. I was trying to
get last year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did get one last year. Yep. So trying to get through the quarterfinals, actually got through, that situation, moved on and into the quarterfinals, playing one of, I guess, I8 football's royalty here in the round of 8 in polo, a team that has had a lot of success since 8-man football kind of became a little bit more prominent. What's your take on what the Cardinals have to do to win that long road trip?
Well, yeah, like you said, a power polo came in 2019, I believe, won the state title the first year. I was at that game against Milford Cissna Park. There's not been a season since in which the Marcos haven't been to at least the state semifinals, which would mean that they would win this game to keep that streak alive. They're just so imposing. They lost to Milledgeville, the defending state champion, in week 4. Besides that, they've won all 9 of their other games by double digits, 8 of those by 20-plus points. So they're just a load to try and stop. But this St. Anne defense, led by Coach Alan Rude, who's about as defensive as they get in terms of style and how they came up, they're gonna be tougher to score on than most of the teams that Polo's faced this season. By that same token, Polo's also tougher to score against than a lot of the teams that St. Anne's faced. But, man, Grant Pomeranski threw for 4 touchdowns last week, 3 of them to Matthew Langelier. He ran for 2 more. When your quarterback's able to have a 6-touchdown day, you got a chance against anybody. I think out of the 4 quarterfinals in the state, this might be the most interesting one. And then all of a sudden you look at winning 2 playoff games and you're already in the state semis. So the Cardinals, it's a tough road trip, a long road trip. You're going up to play. I think that there's got to be not intimidation, but when you're playing a school named the Polo Marcos, that's got to do something to your head a little bit, right? Something mentally. You got to just think about, I'm playing the Polo Marcos, and but it'll be a tough trip. But I've got faith in Coach Rude and them boys.
Yep, it should be interesting. Well, we've got a maximum of 7 teams we can get on to the next week, and hopefully we've still got 7 teams to talk about next week. So we'll catch up with you then. And until next week, thanks for joining us on the Kankakee County Football Podcast.